Hello and welcome back to Sing the Score. Is there anybody still out there, or am I talking into the void? Well, I'm still here anyway, banging on about Monteverdi. And in fact, last week there was no Sing the Score because I Fagiolini was giving its all Monteverdi concert in Voces 8's wonderful Live from London series. You'd think we were ready to move on from Monteverdi by this stage, but as tenor Nicholas Mulroy pointed out in the post-concert chat, there's a reason we keep going back.
And for me, I think that this music is as close as we get as singers to real great chamber music making. This is for me, this is kind of, it's not about comparison, but this is Beethoven quartets or Haydn string quartets. So this is a really chance to make music, like the idea of a real conversation between all five elements, for example, of the piece. It's really something that I think we all cherish really deeply. Yeah.
And indeed, from the point of view of just trying to find something interesting to say about pieces, Monteverdi's madrigals are just so interesting. In the concert, which you can still buy season tickets for, all events available as catch-up until October 2020, we sweltered in central London in our suits in temperatures of 35 degrees. But one of the pieces offered some respite from that, the fresh west wind that features in Zefiro Torna. And in fact, that Zefiro Torna, the duet, was the very first Sing the Score back in March. Just the score, no explanations, probably an improvement for that. But you're thinking,
What's a zephyr?
Well, Zephyrus was the name for one of the four winds in the ancient Greek civilization. Boreas, the north wind, was feared as very strong and stormy. Eurus, the east wind, also associated with storms and nice sandals. Notus, the south wind, very hot and bringer of late summer storms, which leaves gentle Zephyrus, the warm westerly breeze associated with spring, just about the only one without a storm. See how he brings good weather to produce bountiful flowers. And in the duet Zefiro Torna, this wind returns to symbolise how all is well with the world. Before we learn that this is just set up to contrast with the stormy fate of the lover. The poem Monteverdi set in that duet from 1632 is by Ottavio Rinuccini, his collaborator on the lost opera Arianna. But the poem seems to be an homage to a more famous poem of the same title, Zefiro Torna, by the 14th century Francesco Petrarca that we met in Sing the Score 13 a few weeks ago. Petrarch, who claimed his sonnets were written in praise of the mysterious Laura.
Laura, illustrious through her own virtues and long famed through my verses, first appeared to my eyes in my youth, in the year of our Lord 1327, on the 6th day of April, in the church of Saint Clair in Avignon at Matins. And in the same city, also on the 6th day of April at the same first hour, but in the year 1348, the light of her life was withdrawn from the light of day.
Monteverdi also set Petrarch's Zefiro Torna, but some 25 years before, not for a duet, but for the five voices in his sixth Book of Madrigals 1614, this one probably written 1607. The conceit is the same. Zephyrus symbolises everything that is lovely. In line 3, Procne and Philomena, chattering birds with a rather complicated history from Ovid, are tweeting happily away, and Jove looks down on his daughter Venus and all is well. But then, in the second half of the sonnet, we find that all is not well, because this poem is one of those written after Petrarch's beloved Laura's death. And it's not just the west wind that's returned, but also his heavy sighs, because on her death, Laura has carried the key to Petrarch's heart with her straight to heaven. And other women not only mean nothing to him, but are like savage beasts. Here's the opening. Zephyrus returns in joyful triple time, skipping along and bringing back the fair weather. You'll remember from French lessons, that the word for weather in French is le temps. Le temps. But it's also the word for time. And in Italian, it's the same, it means both words. So although Petrarch means it here as weather, Monteverdi changes the time on that word to 2 in a bar instead of 3. Monteverdi's little joke.
Oh, so funny.
And as we hear of fiori, flowers, the cantus and bass parts make the shape of a nice flower on its side. 2 birds, Procne and Philomena, are heard chirping or chattering, garire in Italian, whence we get garrulous in English. And Philomena, who is she? Well, according to Ovid's Metamorphosis, which is a sort of part mythological history of the world from the creation up to the time of Julius Caesar, she was a character who was raped and mutilated by the husband of her sister, Procne. She gets her revenge by killing his son and serving him up in a stew, which the husband unwittingly eats. What you're looking at is an image of the great reveal when it's, haha, here's your son's head.
Which was nice.
He then cuts out Philomena's tongue. It's not for the faint-hearted, all this Greek mythology, is it? But she escapes with her sister Procne, and just at the moment they're going to be recaptured, they miraculously turn into birds, Philomela into the nightingale, which here, rather than its association with beautiful singing, is more connected with lamenting. So Monteverdi writes, lamenting, pianger Philomena, which he colours with some sweet dissonance. Monteverdi has set the word Philomela as Philomela, which is not really the rhythm of the word Philomela. And this is for a reason, but only one that singers would have understood. Because at this period, short longs in triple time, ya-cha, cha-cha, are set as coloured notation. Coloured, the term, it meant blackened, effectively. It doesn't affect the rhythm, but it is a thing. And here Monteverdi seems to have chosen the rhythm so that he can use the black, which is, of course, associated with mourning. It's a way of symbolising Philomena's lamenting on the page. I'm not sure it helps, but Philomela in Greek literally either means lover of fruit.
Oh,
I say!
I must have fruit.
Or, according to my Greek scholar friends, lover of sheep. But I couldn't find the right sort of film for that one. Spring appears, Monteverdi's fast notes reminding us of the flowers in Botticelli's painting La Primavera. In fact, on the right of the picture, that is Zephyrus, our west wind, capturing Chloris, who then turns into the personification of spring, Primavera, the lady with the flowers. And spring, which Petrarch says is white and vermilion, candida e vermiglia. The white is symbolised by the chord of F major, so there are no flats or sharps in the chord itself to blacken the white chord. And then vermilion symbolised by the 2 sharps, the colour of C sharp and F sharp. If you were thinking that he used F major because the chord itself only uses white notes on the keyboard, then nice idea, but black and white on keyboards that way round until the 19th century isn't really a thing. And in fact, Italian keyboards at the time, both would probably have been made of brownish wood.
So thank you for playing, but no points there. Now it's on to round 2.
In which Monteverdi largely repeats the music to the first quatrain for the second one, repeating the gestures but adapting them. What was the flower shape, fiori, is now Jove rejoices, and that still works well. And we again get a lovely hemiola at the cadence. A hemiola is the halving of the speed of the triple time, and it usually happens at cadences. I'd like to be in America. Particularly became very prominent in cadences in the 17th century from Monteverdi onwards up to Corelli and Vivaldi and beyond. So, a total change of mood now, as we'd expect from the text. Ma per me, but for me, return heavier sighs, più gravi sospiri. Monteverdi moves to a chord of B major here, a chord he saves for very particular moments of extreme duress and theoretically at the time implying great harshness, even though to modern ears it ain't necessarily so. And the memory of Laura draws sighs from deep within him, she who carried the keys of his heart straight to heaven. And we hear this ascent in the top two parts.
Well, the end of a short but very intense spell there, following a difficult Baroque partnership. And something I've not seen before in all my years watching, a curious melodic figure with some ornamentation on the word chiavi. It's hard to say what it might actually mean, but then of course, what does anything mean anyway?
Well, indeed. So I asked colleagues on Facebook's Historically Informed Performance pages about this, if anyone had an idea about why he'd set chiavi in this particular way, and we batted it to and fro, didn't really come to any sort of agreement. But then I remembered the Ficta hotline. I've heard they've got more detailed services if you're prepared to pay.
Ficta hotline.
I'm told I can ask other questions, not just Ficta.
To seek the higher echelons of musicology, sacrifice must be made.
Do you want more money?
We want your soul. State your question.
Monteverdi 1614, Zefiro Torna. What's going on with those chiavi phrases at the end in the soprano parts?
Wait.
Speak.
Zefiro Torna, 1614. Chiavi. Is this cadential ornamentation or something symbolic?
Look at it. Use your eyes. The shape of the notes themselves. Do they not seem to take the form of a key? Each note one of its teeth. The key also to total understanding. The key to the seconda pratica.
Well done there. The last line of the poem says, "And the sweet gestures of the beautiful and virtuous ladies are like a desert and cruel, savage beasts." To set this, Monteverdi divides the phrase into two. For the first part of the phrase, even though it's part of a negative overall idea, he pops back into a joyful triple time. That's a very late Renaissance way of word setting. You set part of a phrase and not the whole idea. But this pays off big time at the end, as he's now left with the words, "are a desert and wild savage beasts." A slightly odd turn of phrase, but as a contrast to the vibrant landscape of spring that the piece started with, it's perfect. How does Monteverdi respond? Well, now is a good time to mention that he seems to have known another setting of this text by Luca Marenzio, a few years older than him, a composer known for the quality of sweetness in his music. Marenzio's four-part setting of this text ends with two ideas which Monteverdi seems to have been inspired by. The first is that on the phrase "are a desert," Marenzio descends in thirds with syncopation between each other. Bum, 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 bum. Monteverdi also uses those thirds, but he doesn't bother the syncopations. His point is more about the harmony. It's a sort of harmonic desert, and it's too dry to grow any new chords.
Hortico-musicological. Great.
Then on Wild Savage Beasts, Fere Aspere Selvaggi, Maurizio uses suspensions and dissonance to create that feeling of harshness. Some 22 years later, Monteverdi certainly outdoes Maurizio in the way he sets these words, with stronger suspensions, a harshness to them that Maurizio doesn't really try to manage. And indeed, Monteverdi has to break a few compositional rules along the way to do this. Let's hear the whole passage. It's an amazing passage, although putting my neck on the line, I do find that compared to other great Monteverdi endings, it slightly runs out of steam just before the end, becomes a tiny bit predictable. But others, and indeed Monteverdi, may strongly disagree. It's interesting to note that the original performers of this piece were probably a couple of countertenors or falsettists on the top line. We know there were some of them at the court, and they would have taken part in Monteverdi's opera Orfeo that had happened earlier that year, which, while it didn't involve any sopranos, female sopranos, did involve a castrato that they'd had to bus in from the court at Florence. And the top notes Monteverdi seems to be writing for a falsettist or a castrato is an E or an F up here. And that means that would really have sounded at those moments at Fere, at the end of that, really, really quite strident and strong in the way that it wouldn't quite with a soprano. There's a good recording of this out there with Profeti della Quinta. Just Google search Profeti della Quinta, Monteverdi, Zefiro, Torna, and you'll come across that. I've touched a few times in this series on the importance when singing a cappella in finding acoustically pure major thirds and minor thirds, really quite different from the piano, about a fifth of a semitone different from the piano, which is quite a lot. We're trying to find ones that reflect the natural intervals in the harmonic series so we can make the chords sound really, really sweet. For more instruction in this, just Google SingTheScore number 9, Bennett, where we're looking at Bennett's Weep O' Mine Eyes. And in this piece, that's going to mean keeping B flats, C's and F's high as they sit on the top of minor thirds, while D, E and F sharp often sit at the top of major thirds, so keep them a little lower. Just so we're clear, this isn't a current sort of tuning fad. Well, it is, but it's physics. And over at that episode number 9, you can hear some examples given of piano thirds and acoustically pure thirds, and you'll be able to hear the difference. That's it. Almost time for the track. Just wanted to say thank you for staying with Sing the Score over this summer, this peculiar summer, which we're all going to remember. Future episodes will appear, but more sporadically, as I take a break and indeed try to meet up with Fagiolini as best we can to record some samples for future programmes. There will be an episode to coincide with Stour Music in early September. This is the Early Music Festival in Kent, originally set up and run by Alfred and Mark Della, two countertenors. It'll be online this year, beautifully filmed by Polyphonic Films, who've been putting these episodes together every week at breakneck speed. Time for a break for them as well. And of course, Live from London continues every Saturday at 7 p.m, as does Choral Chihuahua every second week. Have you heard the new Matthew Brook episode? Absolutely marvellous. What a treat. These are all new things that Fagiolini has been involved in since lockdown. And of course, we've very much relied on your donations to keep them going. Do pop across to efagiolini.com/friends to make a one-off donation, or join our friends' organisation itself, which is where all the real fun goes on. But these programmes have also been supported by the University of York as part of their public engagement programme. I teach in the music department and annually take a few graduate students on the MA in Solo Voice Ensemble singing course. Do look it up if you're interested. Now pray silence for Greg Skidmore and the warning.
Dude, seriously. You may be out there looking for a happy piece for your concert and think, hey, look at this one, it's really fun. But it goes really dark at the end. So careful, okay? Though if you're watching this kind of program, you probably actually really like dark stuff and the naughty chords. So that's okay.
Song